Hey Jai Kishan, welcome to this chat on the Team Leads group. So delighted to have you on the platform here today.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure.
For the audience, let me just do a quick intro. Jai Kishan is Director HR, Heads HR for Quorum Club, and like we were chatting just a few minutes back, one of the unique leaders I've seen who's kind of managed to grow his career in a way where he's leveraging both his education. He's a hotel management graduate, but he's stuck to the hospitality industry, but migrated to the HR leadership role. So it's not very often that you come across people able to leverage both their education, and that's, at least in my books, pretty rare. So welcome here. Thanks for giving us the time to chat with you.
Thank you.
Excited and looking forward to this. Cool.
Absolutely. Let's begin.
So let's go dive in. Let's dive right in, Jay. And what I really want to start by asking is, I guess data-driven decision making has always been around, right?
Yeah.
My question is, do you think, as you have worked in different organizations and with different people and uh, ecosystem around you, do you think that the importance of data-driven decision making has become more important, especially in the last 5 years?
For a fact, see, initially when organizations were close knit and we're going through the phase of where people are working in one space, right? So even if you did not maintain data, you kind of knew everybody, and you did not use data extensively, you knew how they were performing. But now that the world's become smaller and the teams have spread out across regions, you have multiple companies going work from home, this, that, and the other. Tracking performances, planning for things, everything is now based on what data you have. And that collection, analysis, and updation of the data has become extremely crucial. So from your workplace planning to your increments, where it's going to happen, how many more people are you going to need in a busy schedule, all of that becomes fairly easy when you integrate data and how you use it, right? So that's where data integration come in extremely handy.
And is that still very important for even small organizations, early stage startups? I mean, I guess for very large
100%.
organizations, okay.
100%. See, no matter where, all of us aspire to become big, right? You never start by saying, I'm only going to be this much.
Yeah,
So the more data you have, the better understanding of where your market is, what your people are doing, the better integration, better possibilities of you succeeding, right? Most companies kind of don't work out because they've not had their analysis right. You've not realized which market are you supposed to target. Is your product ready for the market or not? And then you kind of just roll out. How many people do you actually need? In most startups, the biggest problem that happens is either under hiring or over hiring.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But if you
Said
have
that
data
very
to
nice.
support it and
Yeah.
tell you how much is the right hire, it'll just make life more easier. And how do you grow your people along with the growth in business? That's most important, right? The bigger the business, the more the people. But then when is the right time to hire? That's the question. With data helps you answer.
But there is also the other side, which talks about uh, uh, paralysis through analysis, and I'm just wondering if for small organizations, you you may go could you go overboard, because let's say you're a founder or you're a HR head and you inherently have a heavy bias for data. Could it be that intuition could allow you to use use heuristics to just make decision making faster? Maybe you get them wrong a couple of more percentage of the times, but could you be trading speed for accuracy if you over rely on data in the early stages of an organization, when maybe you are not multi-locational, maybe you don't have too many people in the organization? Your thoughts on that?
So, see, data is a tool, right? And it's a tool to be used by humans. So, even if I have data in front of me that suggests something else, the analysis suggests something else, It's ultimately my decision as to how my company should run, right? The data is not deciding, the data is answering a few questions. But as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a department head, it's also my instinct that allows me to verify data accordingly or check data or use the data in the right sense of where you're going. So, will decision making become faster if I remove data? Quite possibly. But will its accuracy dip down significantly? Definitely yes, right? It just helps you make more informed decisions as to what you're doing. It's about that. So, especially if you go wrong, it's easier to track where you went wrong because you
Mhm.
have the data with you. If you don't have it, then you're guessing again as to what went wrong.
And is relying on data to make a decision, is it, do you think it's also a cultural muscle, if I can call it that? Like, in the, what I mean is it also to do with the kind of culture organizations build, and
For that.
indirectly or directly make a choice of how much reliance on data uh, to have on their decision making? Is it got some linkages to the kind of culture that the organization has?
100%. It also has to do with what type of organization it is, right? In a tech-based company, you've set targets, right? So you can define what is each person doing, have the data set, and accordingly figure out where you need more. It's quantifiable. But if you look at a hospitality industry, right, a restaurant or a hotel or a co-working space for that matter of fact, you're still trying to figure out what type of people come to you. What are they going to require from you next? Right? And all of those assumptions you can only make if you have the data set. But to create that assumption, it's still the first instinct that kind of builds towards that data entry to happen, to give an analysis at the end of it. So, accuracy of the entry is what defines the ultimate result, right? And certain organizations can do it more accurately compared to organizations which are more dependent on the buyer and the experience that they want to create. So more technical the task, it's easier to do data analysis for it. More experiential the task, it becomes even more difficult to use data and rely. I mean, it gives you a rough idea, but it's not 100% answer.
Another question I want to ask is, if you look at the journey of the world, the corporate world in the last 10 years, I think, like, and that was the first question you answered. So you kind of said data driven decision making has become more important in the last 5 years.
True.
But can I divide that into three parts? Data is first about analysis, is first about tracking. You just got
Correct.
to have the data in the first place. You got to start
Correct.
measuring what you want to measure. So that's simply tracking, right? Then comes
Correct.
the analysis part. You have the
Correct.
data, what kind of insights and analysis you're able to draw from it. And I have a feeling that, I could be wrong, please feel free to disagree, that the organizations have been strong on those two aspects and have been getting better. My question to you is, over the last few years, especially in the age of big data, and we'll talk about, no conversation like this is complete without talking about AI, so we're going to do that
Yeah.
as well. But my question is the third part, which is predictions. Are we getting better to use data to predict what is likely to happen, or at least predict scenarios and probabilities of what's going to happen? Or does that still remain a significantly weak spot for us compared to tracking and analysis?
No, not at all. I mean, see, the more data we gathered, the more we realized how to analyze it, right? The more we analyzed it, the more our sensitivity towards data became better to understand how predictions will happen. And then predictions become easier, right? Essentially, what you would have done manually over the period of years, right, to predict where the data is taking you forward, because you're going through the entire range of data and plotting it and figuring out and analyzing it. To coming to your future question, AI does it far better and far easier, right? It's just about a feed that needs to go in to understand what is it that you're looking for at the end result, and it kind of analyzes, predicts it compared to the market that is out there, seeing the trends in the market. And the more data is made available to it, the faster it works. So, predictions will work provided the data collection is correct.
Completely
Right?
agree.
Yeah.
But is intuition still a heavy part of predictions, or we are moving more and more to leverage to using data
I
to
think,
let the tools predict
uh,
for example?
yeah. So I would say again, it's industry specific, right? And it would
Okay.
depend from industry to industry and the type of people running that organization or making that decision, right? A lot of people rely heavily on data to make predictions and make decisions, right? You have a whole science behind it and how it works in the insurance segment, right? They also do the same thing. They have the data, they predict, they analyze it, and then they do a future prediction as to where it's going to go. So that's heavily dependent on data.
Actually,
Whereas,
that's a brilliant example. I mean, the entire science of predict or of assessing risk of issuing
correct,
policies and launching. It's
is
all
all
about
data driven,
future risk. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Perfect.
There is not one person saying, "I think this is going to go well, and let's just do this."
Yeah,
Nobody's going to put their money on that.
yeah. No, I agree.
So,
That's a brilliant example. Yeah.
yeah. But again, then you move into segments which are more experiential. Now, there the data helps you analyze how your guests are changing, what's going to come in new. So you kind of strategize to put pieces into play that maybe 10 years down the line will make something successful, right? Um, so yeah, it depends on that, and it depends on the need of the hour at that point in time as to how you utilize it. So sometimes intuitions work, sometimes it's data, but again, depends on organization to organization, people to people. Like I said, data is a tool, right? So you use it right, you make the right predictions. But the ultimate call is still of humans to decide what they want to do with their company.
And we live in a real world, which means when we are making predictions for our business, for our goals and our performance,
Correct.
ultimately as an organization, we're interacting with the real world, with the ecosystem, with competitors, with the industry.
Correct.
So making predictions would rely heavily on not just the quality of internal data, but also the
Right.
external ecosystem data, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, what you think you will grow at, for example, in a fast moving world versus a stagnant economy is likely to be very different. So,
Yeah.
do you see organizations making better efforts to read external ecosystem data, which then they marry with their internal data to come up with business predictions for themselves?
For a fact, I mean, take any top company today, they'll be paying thousands of dollars to data collection companies just to get the right data for their market, right? I mean, it's not one person's capability to kind of figure out what's happening in the market. You need to rely on external companies to do that for you. And just with the sheer number of growth in those companies, you can realize how much people are looking forward to getting the right data set with them for the economy that they are working in, and then apply it with their internal data to see where they can grow ahead. I mean, that's a booming industry at this point in time.
And do you see that happening in your own industry as well, the hospitality industry?
100%, hundred
Do you see
percent. I
examples
mean,
of, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you analyze competition, what they are doing, what's the market going ahead like, what's the economic trend, where will we change, what's going to come in new, what is it, what is the prediction for the next 5 years by the data of external organ to see where the market is going to stand, right? And then you kind of use your data to see how you're going to grow, to utilize that market to the best of your abilities to grow your business, and that's what's important.
And maybe I'm just wondering, but let's say at Quorum itself, you are going after a pretty premium niche space in the market today, is
Correct.
my understanding.
Yes.
And that would the entire fundamental basis of having gotten into that market would have been predicated on the entire premiumization trend that we are seeing in the country. So it would
For a
have
fact,
okay.
right? And so quorum, by the concept, if you speak to Vivek and Sonia, who are the founders uh, for quorum, they'll tell you the idea was born to have a space for people to connect in a world that is now completely materialistic, right?
Mhm.
And you don't kind of meet people that often. You, I mean, you socialize, but then you're supposed to socialize in just the family events or the corporate meetings that you have. Now imagine you have a space where you can go dine in, but you have like-minded people who are selected by a team of people, right? Not everybody can take a quorum membership. You need to qualify to become a quorum member. And you got to curate that ecosystem for people to enjoy, right, and connect with such minds. So to do that, you also need the right location to be in. So if you see the quorum's location currently, also one is at Two Horizon, which is like the melting pot of the new age uh, Gurgaon, if I may call it, right? You have Quorum Mumbai in central Bombay, right? Again, a hub of industries around it. And then you have Quorum Hyderabad, which is in Knowledge City. So the whole idea was to understand this data point of the external environment that you're going to go into and then figure out what works for you. That's how you plan out which space to open uh, anywhere. I mean, it's not just about cost efficiency, it's also about whether people are going to come to you in that space or not, and whether you can find the right people. It also depends on what's opening around you, right? I mean, be it the best space in Gurgaon, but if there's no connectivity, there's nothing premium next door to us, and if you'd opened a quorum there, we would have been in soup, right? Because you don't attract the right clientele there. So data becomes a very important part in the industry that we are in. Absolutely. And it also goes for my hires. I mean, unless and until I understand where my revenue is growing, how much footfall am I going to increase, I will not be able to justify how much manpower you need at the level, right? Because it's about also making conscious decisions.
So
So data kind of looks big time.
that's super nice. Okay. I want to shift to the explosion of data tools that we have available at our, with us these days in this industry, especially in the last few years as well. And AI is part
True.
of it. My question is, do you see that these tools have started to democratize access of data and insights to a wider pool of people, corporate leaders, and the working workforce, or do you think it's actually going to create some kind of a gap between the those who have and those who have not? What I mean by that is, and I just give me a minute to ask my question in some more detail. On one hand, I have Chat GPT. I have, you know, Google Gemini, and maybe I'm using somebody is using the free tool. I may be using a maybe a
Paid
premium
version.
subscription, but let's say the free tool is available to all. So that's obviously a much more powerful tool than what we had till, let's say, 3 years back for all of us to use. So that's on one side. But clearly, these tools also cost a lot of money to accumulate the data, process the data, and then throw out the kind of insights which they can. And do you see that there is a risk that the large profitable organizations are able to access the best of these tools and then start to create a chasm between themselves and some of the smaller organizations? Or do you think no, overall everybody is going to benefit from this?
See, everybody is going to benefit from this, right? There's no doubt about it. Now, the question is whether you see that benefit or not as an organization, right? So, before this meeting, I was talking to you about an offsite that we had recently, right? Day one of the offsite, our last session was understanding how to use ChatGPT properly,
Okay.
right? So, it's that detailed. So, uh, it's not just ChatGPT. There are multiple softwares out there which are paid, which are free, depends on how you use them. Obviously, the paid version has more benefits, right? So depending on where you are at in the organization, I think everybody should use it because it just helps you analyze data faster, right? What you would have normally spent or hired people to do, if you compare that to buying a subscription, you will figure out the price to be much lower, right? So it's just that it's you just make or give tools to the right people so that you don't have to hire extra manpower. It's as simple as that. Now look at not just that. Look at your system, for example, right? You guys have these HRMS system and the payroll system that is in place, wherein you record every single transaction the employee does with the employer, right? From pre-joining to document uploads and everything else. Now, this was being done manually by some person in some organization at a long back, right? Where people would collect waste paper, make files, document all of it in an Excel, and then maybe figure out how to do this. And if you go further back, it was on paper, right? Everything was written down. There was no Excel at that point in time, also. So the shift kind of helps you understand it better. Now, with just your software, a person doesn't need to do that, right? I just have to click a picture, scan it, upload it, and ask for a report, and it will automatically give me the report how I want it. What data point do I want to see? I don't have to scroll through. I don't have to delete. I can see it for all employees. I can see it for one. I can see it for a section of those, and split them up as I want it. So that's just the benefit of data. Now, should you spend out of your way to get that feature? That depends on the business. Do you have the need for it right now, or is your organization small enough to work with people? The moment your organization grows, this becomes important because then the reliability on the machine increases to ensure sanctity of data. And that's much more. People will make mistakes. You can make a typing mistake, everything else. And that could drastically change where your answer is. But technology just helps you make it better and faster.
So, coming back to the HR domain, because both of us play in that area in different ways, and you know, you talked about a platform, and maybe I just want to use this opportunity to ask a question, which probably helps us back at office in terms of what we do. So we are kind of working through reimagining how our performance management system works, right? Now,
Right.
my question is, you could use data for pretty much anything in HR, right? It could be for
Right.
recruitment, for attrition management, for uh,
All of
talent
this.
management, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Would there be, as big data becomes available, uh, do you see innovative ways of using data to make better decisions and predictions, specifically in the area of performance management and talent development? Do you think
For a fact.
that's something uh, HR leaders could start to use platform like ours in ways which is different from how it's been historically done? Any thoughts on that?
I think a lot of HR leaders have moved to performance management through data already, right? Because for a lot of industries, like I told you earlier also, which are technical in nature, which have point A and point B as conclusions, uh, it is, I think they're already using this to make it more relevant and make it easier on their own managers to kind of assess their staff. But it gets a little complicated when it comes to hospitality as an industry,
Why
right?
is that?
Because there's no task A, task B,
Sorry, what do you
right?
mean by that? And-
So there's no start and end point to what I would expect from an employee, right?
Okay.
It's still more personal, as in, so if I'm assessing somebody, you're not just assessing on a deliverable matrix, you're also assessing on an emotional matrix as to what they've done. So how you make a guest feel. Now you can't quantify that. I might get a guest satisfaction score at the end of the day, right? Which the guest might give me a 10 or an 8 or a 9, whatever, however their mood was at that point in time. But does that truly define that particular person's ability? Not really. That could define my GM's ability to run the team uh, down below him because that's an overall organizational score. You don't get a people specific score in hospitality industry as much. So with that, it kind of becomes tricky, I would say. But it surely does help you, uh, you know, um, combine all of the data that you would have had on paper or in conversations in a document, which can be retrieved over a period of time. right? And now with AI coming in, you can actually pick up certain words, certain percentages, whatever was spoken during that conversation, to have an analysis maybe 5 years down the line as to what the person's growth has been. What were you saying when the year began and when you took that software and uploaded your conversation on it, to how the next year progressed, to the year after that, and when you got a promotion, how that changed. All of that gets tracked to actually see uh, whether the person has changed from a deliverable kind of specific role to a leadership kind of role. Do you see the transition in the words that they use, right? And that is where I think it'll come into play. It might not just make our lives the easiest immediately, but maybe 5, 6 years down the line, it'll just give us a better analysis of what has happened.
That's fascinating. And okay, I think I just earned the return on my time on this conversation in that last piece that you just said. So
Yeah.
here is a question back to you. You did talk about it, but let me just probe a little further. And I have a question for you for which you may not have a perfect answer, but this is my listening to the customer moment. Okay. You
Yeah.
said an interesting thing back there. You said that when a customer rates us, one, it depends on the mood of the customer
Yeah.
in that moment. Second, when he rates us, honestly, it's a reflection of the how the entire team performed, the GM and her entire team. It is not necessarily a rating on that individual who was serving that customer in
Yeah.
that moment. And it depends on so many soft aspects, how the staff talks, behaves,
Yeah.
manages a mini
All of it.
crisis, all of that. My question to you is, if I have to capture that for you, on my platform, what kind of data would you want me to capture, which will uh, allow you to rate or assess the performance of your team better, not just at a hotel level. Okay,
Hmm.
GM for Gurgaon is 9 on 10 and Bombay is nine and a
Correct.
half or 10. But at an individual level, what kind of data could you potentially, and that could be an HRMS platform like ours, or it could be a CRM like yours. But
Correct.
just very curious to know, how would data be able to convert something which is so soft and so nuanced into something which is numbers?
So, so honestly, we've been trying to solve that point at the core, right? And we're trying to see how we could integrate multiple softwares or data from multiple capture points, right? Like a CRM would capture what the guest is feeling and what their rating is, and was there a glitch, was there an issue, all of that. Who was the person who handled it? Everything there, right? And on the other side, I mean, this is a little trickier piece, but if you start evaluating people on a regular basis, right? And just soft evaluations by their managers. And you kind of train them to assess and rate people on a regular basis with comments as to what happened this week, maybe, right? Uh, with that and syncing from what was captured at the guest end, that amalgamation could ultimately lead to maybe a performance graph of that employee. But that's a very uh,
It's a tough one.
far-fetched piece in my head, at least. It could just be easy, it could just be done by somebody else out there, but I feel that's a little difficult to pull off, especially with the amount of um, reliability on tech that you'll have to have and people being aware of how to use that tech.
I think the challenges amongst a few challenges I can foresee is, one is, how many times are you putting the cognitive load on the guests to actually give
Yeah,
you some kind of micro feedback? I mean, beyond
true.
a point, it might actually become a pain for
It
them.
will
They
become
will
a challenge. Yeah, yeah,
it will become
absolutely.
a challenge. The second point is, of course, how do you actually digitize that feedback? Because you can't be asking the guests to kind of,
Fair in a
uh,
detailed survey. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
I
I
mean,
think
imagine there's a very interesting incident. So before this, I used to be with an organization called Indian School of Hospitality, right? It is a really good hospitality school, or one of the most um,
premium.
forward-thinking hospitality schools, I would call it, right, of the country. And compare that, we used to do student surveys there, right? And there used to be student surveys at IHM as well, where I studied, which was a government college. Both hospitality schools, right? Different clientele, different types of students. This was a government school, students there. This is a most one of the most premium schools in the country. Different clientele altogether as students. Or even in your school when you went to engineering, if you remember, and they did a student survey, right? You'll realize how you filled that survey. There's no way of getting details. It's the same thing as a guest, right? It's upon the mood, it's upon which person you like, which brand you like, what was the ambience like, was the person sitting next to you good or not, right? Did they make a lot of noise? Like even if you go in an airline, right, and you want to rate the experience of the airline, it'll depend on how many kids were crying in that airline while you're flying, right?
Yeah,
The airline has nothing to do with it. They can't do anything about it. Nobody can, but you'd still rate them poor because your flight was
so
inconvenient.
that makes me curious. So this is not something I have thought of before, but as you're talking, this is making me intrigued. How do you measure performance, especially in the customer experience team at an individual level and not at a team level? What kind of data points do you look for to be able to rate individuals in terms of their performance?
So we essentially kind of break it down into two parts, right? One
Okay,
is the a percentage of the overall performance of the organization or the department.
makes
That's a key
sense.
factor, right? Everybody plays a role in it. And the next comes in your tactical performance matrices. So whatever KRAs were set for you in particular, let's say you're supposed to handle a team of 10, what is that team giving a feedback for you like? What do they feel
Okay,
of you as a manager? Or
okay,
if you're part of that 10, what what is it that you think you've achieved? Right? So you always do a self-analysis on the behavioral and the measurable parameters, both of them, and then you kind of get the managers to assess that also, because they are the ones who've been observing, seeing. And unless you increase the frequency of these feedbacks, right? Normally, or traditionally, not normally, traditionally, all of us used to do a yearly appraisal system, right? And then I think a couple of a decade or so back, we introduced the mid-year cycle, right, where you kind of assess people twice. And then nowadays, you do it every quarter just to see where your performance has been. And you track performance on a monthly basis also. You might not do it for all employees, but at least the key people who ensure delivery of revenue or um, people who have the impact on your bottom line or top line, these are the people who kind of you track on a monthly basis as well, just to see where the organization is progressing and what are they doing to support the organization's progress. So that kind of depends and kind of modifies on how things will go ahead. But yeah, two parameters that you take into account is the organization performance and the behavioral performance
understood.
of the employee and what the manager thinks of them.
Understood. And
Yeah.
uh, so let me ask you this: what is your own personal style? Like, if you were to put it on a spectrum, are you more of a and I know we talk discussing data here, so there could be a bias to say I'm heavily data, but how much
Yeah.
intuition do you use in your own decision making? You think?
See, like I told you earlier, data is a tool, right? And it's just that for me as well. I because I'm in an industry that deals with humans, right? I'm in a space that is supposed to deal with humans. Data will only tell me what is their progression been like, right? Data will never be able to assess what that person went through in that period of time. That
Mhm.
assessment is only yours, right? It'll tell you the result. It'll tell you the effort put it, but it'll never tell you what that person was feeling, right? So as an HR, data just becomes a more a fact check, right? At every now and then to tell you, okay, who's performing, who's doing what, who's not delivering, for you to have better conversations with them, for you to understand your people better. Right? The whole reason I moved from hospitality to HR was because I like talking to people. I like understanding people. Right? Data just helps me understand them better. and figure out that if somebody's performance dipped, right, a great performer, somebody's performance dipped, I might not be dealing with them on a daily basis. But when I see that dip, I at least know something went wrong. So then I know where who to have a conversation with and find out what happened, what changed. Right? If you see a dip in somebody's attendance suddenly, if somebody who's been a great performer suddenly is not there and there's a dip in attendance, they might not report to me as an HR head directly. They might have spoken to the manager or whatever to get the necessary approvals. But I know, so I can at least ensure I know what's happening to my people down the line, right? Or you can check, is everything okay? What happened? Now, be it with the person directly or with the manager. Same thing for performance. So data, for me, data is important, right? But it's also the human connect that makes the world spin around. I mean, and data will only tell you a possible prediction, right?
Yes. So I guess what you
Data
said.
will never be aspirational. So an entrepreneur's dedication, that level, that thought, right? Data can tell them, okay, this is achievable, this is a little stretch. But to go beyond that, that is the human capability to make it work somehow or the other. So data is always a tool. It can never be just data to take decisions. That's not happening.
And across your last few years of being a corporate leader, especially an HR leader, if I were to look at HR in a few buckets: workforce planning,
Yeah.
talent gaps, employee experience, skill development, performance management, where do you see that there is still a lot to be done to look at data to make decisions, versus where do you think there is already a very high degree of using data to make decisions? Where do you see them, these different buckets on the spectrum?
So manpower planning, that's the maximum
Okay.
utilization of data, right?
Okay.
Maximum.
Recruitment.
That's where I
Recruitment.
think, yeah, recruitment also, yeah, planning and
Okay.
recruitment, so end to
Okay.
end of that. Right? Where is there a challenge or is there a gap yet? I I feel it's still identification of gaps, right? Again, depends on
Gaps from a talent
talent perspective,
development perspective.
talent development perspective.
Okay.
Because again, you're only capturing what you want to capture. You're not capturing everything around it, right? Although a business doesn't have to do anything with what's happening around that particular person, but a sustainable business or a place that people would want to go to work to requires to understand who their people are, what are they about, right? And that I don't know how that can get captured, right? I don't know if everybody is open enough to understand. Maybe with facial recognitions and emotional checks and balances, we figure out a way of tracking those for employees, right? Maybe we'll have a better understanding of identifying why a gap is there. And I mean, you can send up 10 trainings that you mandate for a person to do, and they kind of achieve nine of them. Then you know there's a gap of one training. Great. So data tells you that. But why was there a gap? If they did nine, why did they not do 10th? Did they not like it? Did something happen? But apart from these 10 trainings, there could be 100 other things that you're not able to track because you never know what to track.
So I have a
So
I have a
that's
wild question, and what happens in these conversations is I'm always looking for how could we, how could we provide a aha moment to HR leaders like you
yeah.
through our platforms. Okay, so let's say you want to, you want wondering, do I really know how my employees' experience is when they work for Quorum? And like you said, you can see the end result, but you don't see everything that is around it. And I come to you with a crazy idea, and I say, Jay, what if my platform throws up, you know, hey there kind of a notification 4 times a day to all your employees, and they all they have to do is allow the laptop to take a picture. I mean, they give the permission. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but it allows us to capture their mood. Okay,
Mhm.
and maybe that gets fed back to you. Just imagine all employees 4 times a day, they're telling you, are they smiling, are they stressed, are they happy? Are they
Yeah.
like having a cigarette, whatever? And that gets converted into some form of data and goes back to you. Do you think that's spooky? Do you think that's like, no, you can't go there?
But I think that's where we are heading as a world,
Okay.
right? You already have Digi Yatra doing some piece
Yeah.
of picture clicking for you. You
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
cameras capturing everything that you
And the
say. You
fact
already
that
have,
and the fact that the new generation posts on Instagram 5 times a day is probably
yeah,
heading towards that. Could that be
it's really
brought into
headed
the
towards
corporate
that.
world?
And maybe that's what is required. I mean, ultimately, if you could move to people-less grocery stores where you kind of bill everything based on barcodes, if you kind of figure out a way to understand people's emotions through their pictures, maybe not even have them capture it, maybe just capture it through the feed that
We would
is
love to
there
do
in
it. I think we
every
only have to think
spaces.
about
Yeah.
the privacy issues.
Yeah, that would require quite a lot of work. I don't think that's this early. It's going to happen anytime soon. But yeah, who knows? Maybe 5, 7 years down the line, something kind of pops up. And if people want to utilize that, I mean, you already do it on food items. If you go to see for it in the manufacturing industry, how do you assess if the item is good or not at 1,000 items per second? These are cameras that do it for you, right? They know the shape, they know how it's supposed to look, they know how the branding is supposed to look. They kind of check for temperatures and everything. Maybe if we figure out a way to measure human emotions like that, we could ultimately.
Okay. I'm going to take that away as an innovation idea for us. And let's see if we can come up with something.
That'd be nice. That'd be scary for the senior generation, but yeah, that'd be quite interesting for people who come in new.
Yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
be excited to see what their emotions were like throughout the day. I mean, you already do that, right? You check your REM sleep, your sleep cycles on your app. If you tell somebody, like if you tell my grandfather that I'm getting you something which is going to track how many hours you sleep, he'll be like, "Are you mad? Why do I need that kind of this thing? I mean, I'm not a what do you call a thief or somebody that you have to keep a track on what time I'm sleeping and what time I'm waking up or
Yeah.
when
It
my
could
heart
get
skips a beat."
it could push the boundaries very soon. So you have to be careful with that kind. Cool.
Yeah, but we're almost there, I think.
But Jay, good. I think good to hear your thoughts. I think looks like you're a very strong advocate of using data to make decisions.
For
But I think it was also intriguing to hear some areas in the hospitality industry where you said how do you capture the emotional and the soft nuances. So
yeah,
I don't know if the industry has answers to all of that. But it was also good to hear where you felt something like the AI tools that we have are actually enabling the larger world and not just the ones who have the money to pay for it. So hopefully that's good for all of us. And yeah, I think finally, if we are able to come up with better ways to capture data around areas which are harder to catch, the softer aspects, I think that is something which is probably going to enable an HR leader like you. But yes, we need to figure out how do you do that
anybody and
without,
everybody.
yeah,
Yeah,
how do you do
anybody
that
and
without
everybody.
anybody and everybody. But like you
Yeah, it's
said,
also
the grandfather is what we have to think about, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay,
Done.
Jay, this was
All
fun
right.
talking to you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Appreciate that and
Thank
best
you,
of
Amit.
luck.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.